Oh, welcome back to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life podcast with Laurel and Laurel. And we today are responding to a request from one of our listeners on self care after COVID. They asked us to talk a little bit about that. And I think it's a great topic for all of us to really take a good look at very straightforwardly, right, Laurel? Rather than kind of looking at it, but not really. It's great to know that the world has changed and our self-care needs might be changing too.
It is so true. And I sometimes think we tend to get into a self-care routine that doesn't change. And then when we're not feeling our best, we're wondering, well, I'm practicing self-care. What has changed? Why am I not feeling well? But adjusting our self-care routine, rituals, practices based on the changes around us, I think are really helpful.
I think so too. And I love that you brought up that point right off the bat because I feel like that is so important because even if things were stable in the outer world, I think a self-care routine that gets stale or feels stale can you can lose interest in it actually, and then it becomes a chore. And so even the idea of changing it up a little bit and creating some diversity or some dynamic movement in your self-care routine is a great idea.
And it could just be tied to the energy and enthusiasm, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
changing the energy of your self-care.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Because self-care, I mean, ideally, I think the ideal state of self-care is that it's a pleasure to do. And we don't always necessarily feel that way, right?
That is hard
Right.
to feel. I will admit I tend to feel often like self-care is a chore.
A chore. Yeah, yeah. And so, wow, do you relate to that out there? Who's listening? And I'm wondering who can relate to that. I really want to know. Leave a comment in our podcast stream here. I want to hear about how people are feeling about self-care because I do think that this is a really beautiful topic to explore and embrace in new ways, and how it can. I think it's a very powerful um, topic and idea in our lives that if we work with it well, can really up level our daily experience. And so we really want to dive into it. So thinking about COVID and the changes that you see with your clients and in your own life, what do you notice about self care? As we're not even post COVID. I mean, we are post COVID, the first round of what we might be experienced, and now we're into a new, I don't know, stream of what's going on and more to come. So, yeah, what are you noticing, and what's going on with you, Laurel?
Am seeing, especially with my clients, the maybe the exhaustion of lingering uncertainty, right? And so we
Yeah,
all want to feel like we're in control of our lives and control of our situation, our daily routines. And so with that, I am really encouraging people, all of my clients and friends, family, just to focus on the present, be present as a way to manage and to take care of your mental and physical health as we face uncertainty.
yeah, yeah.
We tend to forget that life is uncertain
Right.
in normal conditions, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm seeing some of that.
Hmm.
And then perhaps, the tied to the uncertainty of how they should behave, what they should do. And so many of those questions come from the comparison to others
Yeah.
and not going inward. And we talk so much about that inner work and going inward to find your answers.
Yeah.
So that's one of the tools that I use and I encourage others to use. Go inward to seek your answers.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody is having their own personal experience of the changes in the world and dealing with COVID and what your own health condition is. And so I know, like there's a lot of talk around um, honoring what's right for you versus looking outside and seeing what other people are doing and worrying about that, or judging it, or getting into the story of that. Instead, just honoring that impulse from within. If you need to still be wearing a mask even though you're vaccinated, that's okay. If you still need to be toning down your social life because that feels right, then that's okay. I think it's that allowing whatever feels right for you to honor that gracefully.
Yeah, and isn't that difficult sometimes
Yeah, it
for us to
is.
do? Um,
Yeah.
to be able to stand firm in whether it's our beliefs, our intuition, and let that be the guide to how we make decisions, and then how we use our voice to let people know what we need and that we're honoring ourselves. That is not easy.
Yeah, yeah. It's been such a opportunity, I know, for me to practice using my voice of compassion with people. When people start talking about other people and their behavior, and I feel like it's an opportunity to say, look, everybody has their own experience right now, and it's okay to let people do what they need to do for themselves and not worry about them, and just focus on what's right for us, and contribute to the conversation in that way, right?
Yeah. What a beautiful lesson. I
Yeah,
was
I
just thinking
know.
about last year during 2020, it was a great lesson for many people, including myself. I learned so much. And now, in this new space that we're in, what if we come out of this and we have greater
Mm,
compassion
yeah.
and ability to allow people to honor themselves and do what they need
Yeah,
in
I know.
every situation?
Wouldn't that be beautiful if we
Could
all
you
could think
imagine
like that?
how many
Oh.
Thanksgiving dinners are going to fall apart?
That's right. That's right. So, thinking about last year, one of the topics that came up a lot was people realizing. I think I heard this more than the other, but I also heard the reverse, that they didn't realize how much of an introvert they were, and that they really loved the quieter routine and being home more and being less social and feeling the pressure taken off of them to engage in social activities that they realized they didn't really want to be doing. And so I know that, for our listeners, for people that are becoming aware of that it's okay not to return to the old socializing habits that you have, if this kind of change feels right for you. This is a time to leap into honoring that more and learning how to have the conversations with people that are more social, that it's okay that you're not engaging all the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always thought that well, not always. I've gone back and forth between thinking I was an introvert, and then when I had a very outward focused corporate career, I thought I was an extrovert. Last year when I was here at home for months, um, I really thought that I loved the quiet time and being at home. Um, and so, the jury's out if I'm an introvert or an extrovert, but I don't know that that really matters to me now. What matters is, am I acting and being who I'm comfortable being with a situation? So I got to a point where I really missed being with people, um, but I didn't miss the hustle and bustle and maybe the rat race that I knew at
Yeah.
another time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and the transition, going back into being in my car and driving somewhere. I may have gone 2 weeks without driving anywhere,
Yeah.
and so then going back on the highway changed my whole perspective of what the outer world was doing, and oh my gosh, how did I ever do this every day before?
Mm,
And
yeah.
so that's been interesting to kind of readapt.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I think the pace of life, for so many people had ramped up to a level that, I one that was really uncomfortable, and yet we just kept adapting to it. I know that I had this wonderful quote, and I can never remember it exactly. If I can find it again, I'm gonna memorize it because it's so good. It talks about, how as humans, we adapt to our circumstances. And so any level of chaos or busyness or whatever that comes into our life, if it's steady state enough, we will adapt to it because that's our survival instinct to be able to do that. And so many of us have adapted to lifestyles that really we don't feel healthy, don't feel good, and we really don't even like, but we think we're supposed to be doing it. And so we just keep on going that treadmill, that rat race, that we talk about. And so it's been an opportunity to reconsider all of that for people. So self-care after COVID has a lot to do with, are you willing, to look at the changes that have gone on in your life and really examine, what do you prefer and how can you start to craft your life around your preferences now instead of just jumping back in and trying to do the old thing as the old things
Right.
reoccur. Yeah.
And one of the things I think about often is that, during COVID, I found a lot of self-care routines that I had not incorporated in my life before. Yoga at home compared to yoga in the studio.
Yeah.
Trail
Yeah.
walks, walking in nature so that I was in a place where I wasn't running into other people, where I didn't see other people.
Yeah.
I had not, you know, been trail walking even close to home for decades.
Yeah.
Um, and so now I think about, how do I incorporate those self-care practices that I learned during COVID
Mhm.
into my life so that it doesn't become either or, it becomes and. And we've talked about this before.
Mhm. Yeah.
How can you engage in pre-COVID life if you need to, and bring some of the practices, the self-care practices that you learned in COVID, during COVID,
Mhm.
you know, into your life?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, if there are listeners out there that are struggling with, I just want it to go back to the way it was, we really need to work with letting go of that because it will never go back to the way it was. We are creating a new paradigm of living through this whole experience, and as it lingers and as it continues, and as we experience new variations in it, it's causing us to continue to evolve and adapt and grow. And the normal that we knew before is not going to come back. It's just not. It's going to be some new normal that we're creating together.
Yeah. And isn't that the way life is? Every day we're
Yeah.
creating, the present and the future, and holding on to the past really does create some conflict, I think, in our being.
Yeah.
So what kind of practices did you take out of COVID?
My life didn't change a lot. One of the things that I knew, about myself was that I am more of an introvert, and so I have a very quiet lifestyle in relative terms. When I'm speaking, I always laughingly say, I mean, I can understand why people wouldn't be, interested in socializing with me because my idea of fun is meditating. Like, oh, that's a lot of fun. So yeah, I mean, I didn't, and my routine was working from home before COVID mostly. I had a business with my husband that we ended up selling during COVID, which was a real amazing experience and wonderful for us. Um, and and so my life coaching practice has remained the same because it's mostly been via video and telephone and all that stuff. So I haven't experienced a lot of change. I think the biggest thing for me has been allowing myself to use my voice in social situations where I feel like the conversation is getting really negative, and I'm more willing now to say something to try to bring it back to a more neutral place or a positive place. And I think this is one of the things we want to talk about was because the judging other people and the judging the situation only creates negativity and heavy energy, and it doesn't produce anything positive for any of us. And so, I think that's one of the things for self-care is how to not get into the practice of judgment, how to
Yeah,
practice acceptance, right?
right. And, you know, whether it's COVID, post-COVID, or any other situation, what a
Mhm.
beautiful practice to
Yes.
practice being, an objective observer and not the judge.
Yes, yes. And that's one of the beautiful things that comes from a regular meditation practice is we grow that. It's literally like a muscle in our body, in our mind, where we have the ability to sit and just watch our thinking and watch, our urges and our impulses and to have some distance between the actual doing or saying and the thought and the impulse itself and create that space of, is that really
Yeah.
what I want to do? Is that really what I want to think? How is that thinking serving me? It's a beautiful thing about meditation.
It it is. And for those listeners who have not practiced meditation, maybe this is your invitation
Mm,
to to learn a little bit about meditation. And one of my favorite outcomes, I'll say, of meditation is it taught me how to sit in the discomfort,
yes. Yes.
and learning how to just stay in this place for a moment or 2 minutes,
Right.
5 minutes, whatever it might be. Whether it's the physical discomfort of sitting, in a certain posture,
Yeah.
or the emotional, mental discomfort of silence or fleeting thoughts,
Mhm.
or even doing it wrong. When you start meditating and you think you're doing it wrong, that's uncomfortable.
I
So
know.
there's so much goodness in that. And what a
Mhm.
good, analogy to what we're talking about now is that, you
Yeah.
know, self-care and post-COVID, it's a little uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
can we be in discomfort for a brief moment in time? Because
Yeah.
that is what this will be, you
Yes.
know.
In the long haul.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. And how do we look at that? How do we work with that internally, the discomfort? So let's talk a little bit more about that because I think that will be helpful for listeners.
Yeah.
Is one of the ways is to sit and just observe it. And I know when I'm observing my discomfort, anxiety, whatever it is that I'm feeling, and I have a practice of tuning into what's going on in the physical body. So identifying what's uncomfortable in my physical body or what the feeling is, what the impulse is, what the pain level or stress level is, and then considering the emotional level of it. Is there an emotion here that's bothering me that I'm not allowing to move and resisting or whatever? And then what are the thoughts that are associated with it? And then kind of my overall energy. So I do a physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, energetic evaluation of it. And in that, what happens is we're not resisting the experience, and that begins to change it in and of itself. It's very powerful.
Yeah. That is incredible.
Yeah.
One of the things I do is just recognize it as if it's, oh, that's a hummingbird, right? Oh, that's discomfort.
Mhm.
Not question why, not
Yeah.
not go deep into overthinking it, just
Mhm.
acknowledge it
Yeah.
as, oh, that's what it is, and not hold on to that. Um, and as I've learned more how to figure out, where a discomfort or where an emotion sits in my body, that is a practice. And I admire you that you can bring it full realm right through from the body to the spiritual. But as I've learned to do this, I rather than trying to identify where in my body it is, I give it some attributes that I can relate to. And so I don't know if I've shared this in prior podcasts, I don't remember, but um, acknowledging that there's a feeling and then giving that feeling a color.
Yeah.
And then after identifying the color, identifying what shape is it. If that feeling had a shape, what shape would it be? And and I find that the combination of the color and the shape gives us a lot of characteristics of it without having to name it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that.
Um,
And it's great for somebody who's visual. Where
yeah,
it feels like it's nothing that you can kind of grab onto, you almost create a more visual experience with it to work with it in a more dynamic way.
yeah, yeah. It's a lot of fun to
Yeah.
do that little bit of exploration
Yeah.
without overthinking it.
I know, and I kind of like the idea. Let's tag on to that. If you were more auditory person, a person that was more, noise and voice oriented, you could ask the discomfort to speak to you.
Mm,
Because when we identify, which one of those is our more primary strength internally, how we learn and how we experience the world, we can more readily find intelligence in the experience, so to speak. So if your discomfort was speaking to you and it had a voice, what would it sound like? And what would it be saying to you right now?
right?
Right? Yeah. Yeah. That would be
Yeah,
very powerful.
that's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And how to know if it's the discomfort or if it's your inner critic, right?
Yes. Yes. And what an important voice to discern, right? Like we want to learn our inner critic's voice. We want to be able to identify that inner critic's voice because we want to learn how to speak back to it and learn how to calm it down and
Yeah,
put it in its place, so to speak, so
yeah,
it doesn't
yeah.
ruin our lives.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That could be a whole nother podcast
Yeah.
on befriending your inner critic.
Yes, yes. We're gonna plan on that. Come back, listeners, for that one because that's going to be a juicy one. So,
Ah,
what else? After let's go on to the topic, Laurel, of honoring what everybody needs. I feel like that's where we want to make sure we get in on that before we close out the podcast because that's one of the biggest things, right? Everybody has different needs and different ways of moving through this experience. And we really want to learn how to honor that.
yeah, and I think it's really important not just to honor it in ourselves, but honor other people's
Yeah.
needs as well. And so, if I had to start, I would say that starts with awareness, right? The combination of being aware of your needs,
Mm-hmm.
the self-kindness of allowing your needs to be what they are without judgment
Mm-hmm.
and allowing them to change.
Yeah.
That it would be awfully long life if our needs never changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, kind of letting that be, I think it's really important for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And the people that we live with, we may be, many people are in situations where different people in the household have different needs, which is a whole dynamic that plays out in a daily kind of way in this experience. And so, how do we honor and not get frustrated with the other person? We have to adapt and learn new skills of living with people by allowing that kind of shift in the relationship or in the household experience, even.
Yeah. And even beyond that, it just came to my thoughts about honoring the collective needs,
Mhm.
right? And so we have our individual needs, we have our in relationship needs, in those people in our household
Yeah.
or that we're in direct relationship. And then the collective needs. What do we need as, as a community, as a world? What do we need? And
Mhm.
how can we honor all of that?
Yeah. I think I want to speak to the likely listeners that we have, which are, again, more sensitive people, intuitive people, high, conscious people, people that are really wanting to do some inner work and willing to look at themselves and take responsibility for their lives. And I feel that those are the people, this is a community of us where we are needed so much in the world right now to have our voices come forth and speak up because there's so much noise out there about what we think is right, what we think is wrong, who has an agenda to try to, make happen. And if your agenda is simply to allow others to do what's right for them, to be compassionate, to be kind, to be a voice of acceptance, this is big for where we are in the world right now, don't you think? This can make
I
a
do.
big difference. Yeah.
I think I'm already seeing the difference that,
Mm,
that we're making in using our voice and understanding our needs in our relationships, in our families, in our workplaces.
mhm.
As more and more people return back to a workplace, the need to be able to know what you need and voice your needs
Mhm.
is critical
Yeah.
to a successful return.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and, hopefully being able to adjust and adapt, as we've talked about, with this and that. I can take care of myself in both places, at home and at work.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's great. So, Laurel, as we finish up, what comes up for you around maybe some suggestions for our listeners around some inner reflection and maybe some journaling around this topic for us today? Some suggestions about how to explore it a little bit more and embrace that we're in this experience. It's not going away, and how can we rise and feel good about it, and grow our comfort zone around it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's so many things when I think
Mhm.
about, you know, becoming aware of how you feel, um, without really going through the why, but maybe the journaling, end of day, beginning of the day, of how did I feel today?
Mhm.
How did that compare to how I want to feel,
Yeah.
right? And then what can I do tomorrow to feel better?
Yeah.
Even if we can't change the situation,
Yeah.
how do we feel good despite the circumstance? And that, I think, the work I try to do is my feelings that influence my thoughts. And
Mm.
then the reverse, my thoughts that influence my feelings.
Mm, yep. I love that. I love that. That's such a beautiful dynamic. I feel like that's really important for listeners to tune into, and adapt even as a regular practice is being able to notice, what feels like it's coming first, the thought stimulating the feeling stimulating a story, because that's a beautiful self-awareness practice that can really empower us in our daily life and how we are recognizing how we operate in a kind of subconscious, unconscious stream of living way. Yeah, and what's coming up for me is this idea of what thinking back, taking a little journey backwards and thinking back to before COVID, and then during COVID, especially the early stages, and then how have you changed? What have you learned about yourself? And how can you take what you've learned to show up more authentically
Mm,
in life? Because I think that ultimately most of us are most comfortable when we're feeling authentic, when we're really being who we are in the world and are comfortable in that space. And so this really is an opportunity, I think, to, learn more about who you are authentically, what you really want, how you really want to be, and now,
yeah.
seize the opportunity, so to speak.
Yeah, that's really, really good.
Yeah, yeah. Good.
Mm.
Thank you, Laurel, for taking time to explore this topic. I hope this helped our listeners around COVID. If you have more questions, make sure you send them in. And we'll be back for our next podcast, which is on honoring your values inwardly, which is a really interesting topic and one that you don't want to miss. So we'll be back. Thanks, Laurel.
Bye.
Bye.